Hello, I am Radagast at your service with Mystic Vision number 9 on February 21st, 2016. And I am joined by my guest, Shelley, who might be a very frequent guest on Mystic Vision now. I think it's going to kind of provide a lot more information and might even be a little more entertaining, and it certainly will be more visually interesting. So hello, Shelley. Please say, introduce yourself a little bit to my viewers.
Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be here sharing some space with our Reverend Radagast. I'm in the same boat as you. I think we all look out into our beautiful world and see that we could do so much better. And I'm here to share that with you.
All right. So I have 3 topics that I'm not going to go on at length as I sometimes do on certain topics, but I think there are things I just want to bring out. Some of them are topical and some of them are just kind of philosophical, which I feel is always a good position to take when viewing the world, because you get a bigger picture. And the philosophical view is a little less emotionally plugged in. And when we're not emotionally plugged in, we can see a little clearer. We can at least take in the data clear enough so then we can ask ourselves how we feel about that data without starting to feel before we have all the data. And so one of the things that, really the worldview I think is very important. And generally, and how humanity is performing on the world stage, which is a very mystical perspective. And so really, besides the domestic elections in the United States that are, all the primaries, which will be a topic of discussion, really what we're seeing in the world right now is a conflict in civilizations. And as I've said in other mystic views, the primary schism is really in the East versus West, in many ways, is the Roman Catholic Church versus the Eastern Orthodox Church. Which is one of the reasons why I've mentioned, you see a Slavic nation like Poland at kind of odds with Russia, another Slavic nation. You might go, what's going on here? But when you realize that the Polish people are largely Catholic and associated with the Vatican, and that the Russian Slavs are associated with the Eastern Orthodox Church, you can see, if you understood what the Vatican stood for, then you would see where the real schism is. And that's why I think the meeting between the Pope and the Patriarch in Cuba was obviously a meeting of great importance. What exactly important happened there, we don't really know. But the optics of it, if you know the schism, if you know what really drives the antagonism, those were the 2 antagonists meeting each other, and that's a really important thing. So as we look at the worldview, we see a lot of war, and we're all kind of aware that, as President Dwight Eisenhower spoke about the military-industrial complex, which is obviously it's one of the bigger businesses on the planet. Once you use a bullet, you can't reuse it. I mean, I guess you could always restuff it, but basically, they get left on the battlefield and there's orders for new stuff. And that's what's been driving. Eisenhower warned us that would drive it. So as we look at the world situation, now I've been making videos for over a year. And I've often spoken about how I like to bring things to look at how humans should look at the world, and to try and have like a template to look at things. I use the human body. To me, if humans want to see how different things that do very different things perform harmoniously, you look at the body. The liver is very different from the heart, and there's no fight between them. And they live on the same planet, which is the inside of our body. And so when we start thinking about sovereign nations, in many ways is like different organs, but more importantly, sovereign nations, although they're organs, they haven't come together in the body because we haven't united. And so each nation state is kind of like its own organism. Any viable organism knows how not only to exist in its environment, it knows how to defend itself in its environment. This brings us to armed forces and our soldiers. Our armed forces in our country represent our immune system. If we are aggressed upon by other organisms, our own army is there to make sure that that aggression is defeated. That it can't happen, that the health and sovereignty of the organism, in our case, the United States, is preserved. That's the whole purpose of an army, is an immune system. And an immune system belongs inside the organism itself. Now, to me, there might be certain cases. Let's take the sovereign nation of Syria. That sovereign nation has found that the aggression from other nations has overwhelmed its immune system. What they did in this case was turn to another organism and ask, can we borrow some of your immune system in ours? So the Russian Air Force basically set up shop, or portions of it, in Syria to provide an immune response to the aggression from outside. This is okay. The organism invited in another portion of a stronger immune system to bolster its own. But we also see instances, especially in the case of the United States, where our immune system is in other countries that it has not been invited into. When an immune system is in a country that it has not been invited to, it is being aggressive. It is exhibiting poor immune system behavior. If that same kind of, in our own bodies, when our own immune systems attack us, we call that an autoimmune disease. And there's enough, lupus, rheumatic arthritis. There's a number of things that fall into that category. And we can see what happens when our own immune system attacks us. And part of what I actually see is a distraction with the enemies on the outside is that our own immune system, our own army, might attack what's ill in us, which is our government, but instead they're sent outside to attack other governments. So in other words, there's a certain amount of our own immunity that would be turned inward that is actually still being turned outward. And so that's kind of what I have. Basically, I'm asking Americans and I'm asking people in the armed forces, this is not about making the armed forces bad. They are a very, very sacred and necessary part of our immune system. And we want as robust and kick-ass an immune system as we can muster, just as you would like in your body. But we really have to look at ourselves and ask what, and I'm also speaking to the sacred soldiers, the parts of our immune system we're distributed around the planet. Are you doing a sacred function? Or is this kind of not right? And that's really the only conversation I want to do is when it comes to our military in other countries, have we been invited in or have we inserted ourselves? And at a really holistic human level, the question we want to ask ourselves as citizens and as we belong, if we're in the armed forces, are we doing God's work? Are we doing the sacred function of protecting what it is we've been called on to protect ourselves? And maybe in the case of another nation, asking us for immune support. But if our immune system is in a country that doesn't want it, we need to ask ourselves if that's correct behavior. Are we the hands of God when we're an immune system in a country that doesn't want it there? And that's kind of how I'm going to leave that conversation for thought. And I know, Shelley, that the whole concept of armies of the immune systems really kind of caught your attention and created frothing of inspiration. Perhaps you might share some of that.
I love the analogy that you brought to this of our military being the immune system. I think that is absolutely spot on. So it brings us to the question, exactly as you stated, what is their purpose? So if we're looking at for example, the lymphatic system, which everybody knows is part of the immune system, one of the functions of the lymphatic system is to identify purpose and form. So I think what the question that also we need to ask is, what does our enemy or the antigen look like?
Mm.
So where is that antigen? Who is actually the invader? Is the invader in our own backyard? Is the invader not just external? Where else are those antigens located? And what are they doing? That's, I think, the question that as responsible global citizens we need to ask. And I see us very much from the perspective of oneness.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't ever see them. I see me in them. I see them in me. And so I'm looking to be responsible, to be accountable. And what can I do in my own power to demonstrate a stronger immune system? What do you think? Like, what action are we able to take right now? Do we want to look at that to boost our own immune system?
Well, if to be honest, when I look at the United States and also many states in Europe, I see a political system that shows every signs of having a viral infection, brain virus, a spiritual virus. And so in many ways, I think that our immune system has plenty of work to do inside its own body. The body of the United States is severely infected. And I think it's time for a lot of the soldiers to come home and clean up and help the citizens clean up their own body. And again, anybody who's really looked at the immune system, it isn't really a battle zone. It's a lot of pathogens are not necessarily destroyed in the body. A lot of them are escorted to the various ways we, have liquid and solid waste. So in many cases, they're just shown the door. Many pathogens are simply shown the door. It's not about battle. Battle is when the door is not when the advice to leave is not taken, and then things get a little bit hairier. And a lot of times what we're finding out is if you have a robust enough immune system, that it's kind of obvious that a battle is not in the parasite's interest. Very often there is no need for battle. The presence of an overwhelming force is enough to have people make better decisions than when they were just kind of in an open end where there was no consequence regardless of what path they took. So that's really why I'm asking the American people and the people who are our sacred soldiers out in the wild, whether or not they belong out in the wild. Is that really where they belong when there's illness at home to attend to? And similarly, just like when you say you see everything as one, that's where you kind of need that left-right brain operating in tandem, parallel, because I see everybody as one also. And so, but then there also comes the point where each one of us is sovereign and a unique expression of that oneness. So similarly, when I look at the world and the various countries, I do see them as me, but I see them as doing me slightly differently. And that's where the whole concept of some amount of sovereignty, individuality, pursuing your own joy, and that kind of takes place. So there is always, to me, it's when you're thinking about this, you want to hold oneness, but you have to realize that oneness does like to express itself in different colors. I mean, the various colors supposedly come out of white light. It's a prism that turns them into discrete colors. But that's an illusion, but it's not an illusion. See, that's one of the things that happens often is people tend to try to break this down right-brained, or they stay in the left brain, or just keep it all unparsed out in the right brain, where when you operate them in tandem, you have the real picture. You have the wholeness operating in discrete units, but it doesn't stop them from being one, but you can treat them individually as long as you remember they're one. And to me, this is a mindset that takes a little cultivation. It takes to understand when you go, oh my God, I'm thinking this, but I'm thinking this. Oh my God, which is it? It's both. You have to put them together properly. Yeah. And then those two separate things operate as one complete picture with the real information coming in. Would you, I saw you nodding your head, so I'm assuming you agree with me.
I entirely agree with you, but I think you actually brought forward two other points that are really important. And so one, I'd just like to say, maybe what would be useful is if we repurpose purpose. What's the purpose of our military? What has that been demonstrated? But I have a feeling we could repurpose the purpose of our military and be very much better off. Number two, you mentioned infection. So what came to mind when you said that was the opportunistic type infections that are, they take advantage of the debilitated body or the debilitated immune system. So look at what we've had going on. Besides, we could name them all. Everything from Monsanto chemicals, fluoride. We could name all of those elements that have compromised everybody's immune system. Military, personal, collective. And what are we cleansing, removing the toxins? What are we doing? I always want to think in terms of action steps. It's great to recognize that the observation is so important. That's a big, big step. But next, after that, we need to at least make a decision about this. We need to at least come to some action about what to do about it. Are we okay with a compromised immune system? Obviously not.
Right.
What are we going to do?
Right.
Let's do something.
I loved what you said.
Tangible step, even if it's just giving yourself permission to deliberately be happy for 5 minutes. That's something for your immune system. That's something to take you out of the woe is me scenario and modalities, right? What can we do? I know there's some really simple actions that people can take that easy if it's pointed out to them. Sometimes it seems so overwhelming that we really think it's too big of a job and then we just retreat. Military cannot retreat. Immune system cannot retreat.
I loved what you said about opportunistic infections, because that is real. In many ways, what might see is, I see says my internet connection is unstable. I hope my voice doesn't break down. But what we see often, is, let's take, what Eisenhower had identified back in the early 50s about the MIC, or the military industrial complex, and that kind of being one mind virus. And because it's so huge, it is probably maybe the primary infection. Then you have, what that infection is, the need to sell arms, the need to feed the military industrial complex through being aggressive. Then you have this kind of political mindset in the United States called the neocons. And they are a particularly rabid bunch. They are a seriously rabid crew. And to me, they are the opportunistic infection that showed up because the military industrial complex, in its need for war, find the neocons go, oh, they like war. Well, we love war. So they become this new infection, this opportunistic infection that shows up because of the environment of those who want war to feed their bank accounts. So the neocons show up and they kind of synergistically create more war with their psychology. They create the mindset and the excuses for the MIC to go full blast because they're given a platform to speak their sickness. And one of the things you have to remember about a virus, viruses can only replicate if they can get other organisms to take their ideas and duplicate it. When you look at a virus, you really have to wonder if it isn't some form of artificial intelligence, because it can't replicate in all of the organic natural matrix. Everything can reproduce itself. A virus can't. A virus can only infect another organism enough to get it to reproduce what it wants to do. So it's really interesting when you start thinking about viruses and whether or not they actually have an organic origin. But that's getting off the deep end. And I think I should probably bring up.
I love the organic word.
Mm-hmm.
No, not at all. Your sound cut out there for a second. I didn't hear that last part. But if I can just capture for a moment what you said about organic, I think is a key point to really emphasize is that whatever we decide to do, it has to be organic. And when I say organic, I'm using that word to express that it takes every individual to make a choice. It's not about waiting for your government to set out something, okay, folks, here's what we're going to do. This is our strategy. It takes every individual to make that choice, to be the observer, to make a choice what they're going to do.
What a great...
And I don't know what else you said there, but please repeat it, because my sound cut out and I missed that.
It's okay. I'm not going to repeat it because you gave me a great segue with your last words. And although now I've dropped them out because we had that little conversation. Maverick, do you recall the last thing you said?
Mm-hmm.
The last sentence.
Well, I was talking about organic and how organic that it was incumbent upon every single individual to make the choice. But organic meant it had to be everybody. Go ahead.
So that's a segue into choice. And so in America, there's a big choice coming up, and that's a president.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, to me, when I look at the various presidential candidates, there is hardly a single one that I can agree with across the board. And generally, there's hardly, if I do find agreements, it's almost in little bites of their overall picture. If I take their overall picture holistically, they're all really bad people. But the most concern for me is, of course, when Americans look at their presidential candidates, they're thinking domestically. I do see, domestically, I do see some peril for the United States, but I do not see it as a deadly peril. I do not see it as a necessarily world-changing, and I certainly don't see it as an extinction-level event. Now, World War III is an extinction-level event. And of all of the candidates, as reprehensible as I find them all, Donald Trump is the only one promoting dialogue with the Russians, who have now been cast as public enemy number one, which I think is a complete fabrication anyway. So, again, I listened to a 40 minutes talk that Donald Trump, I think, had given yesterday before the final results were in South Carolina. He gave a very inspiring speech. If you are a myopic American, there was a lot of ugly. He had a lot of ugly things to say. But when it comes to the primary supposed adversaries, the other nuclear armed countries, the ones that if we got into a hot conflict with, would be basically an extinction level event on the planet. Well, now domestic American politics seem like not such an important thing to me. Preserving the environment on the planet so that we don't have an extinction level event like whatever happened 13,000 years ago, that because we can see, you can see the kind of masonry and the rock work that was done many thousands of years ago. There was a very high culture on this planet, and something wiped them out. Now, it seems, according to the work of Graham Hancock and people like that, it was in fact an asteroid or a comet that hit the ice pack on North America and created basically a nuclear winter. The temperatures plummeted. This is as we were coming out of the ice age. We went into the little ice age. But it was an extinction level event. And that trauma, the trauma of that event, where we went from a high civilization back down to hunter-gatherers and living in mud huts, because that was not what civilization had grown quite strongly. So that extinction level event made us where we were, let's say 11,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, to where we are today. And now we're facing another extinction level event. And to me, that's World War III. So basically what I'm saying is when it comes to picking the next American president, the only acceptable person, as reprehensible as I find him politically, is Donald Trump, because he's the only one that actually wants to dialogue with the Russians. Even Bernie Sanders supports what's going on with sanctions with Russia because they're being aggressive. And unlike some of the other people who want a no-fly zone in Syria, which is a violation of their sovereignty, so therefore it's aggressive, even Bernie Sanders, although he doesn't support the no-fly zone, he says he doesn't support it currently. That's a modifying statement. That means right now he won't go there, but in the future, if Russia continues to be aggressive, he could go there. So this means he is also willing to play into the dynamics that could lead to World War III, which is an extinction level event. So all I'm saying is Americans have to choose whether our domestic politics are more important than an extinction level or something that could lead to an extinction level event. And so that makes, for me, the only acceptable current person running for president to be Donald Trump, because he's the only one who's in his words is clearly saying he doesn't want a confrontation with the Russians, which is the road to World War III. What do you think about that?
What I think first and foremost is, okay, he's saying that with his words. Are we going to cross our fingers and hope that that's what he means? So we need to have some sense of accountability, a call of accountability. If this is in fact the direction that the American people go, because it is a global question. It has global impact. If you're going to choose Donald Trump based on his words, what words are you going to do to call upon his accountability? And how are we going to ensure that there's an answer to that accountability? Or, whoever else gets in. We need a new option.
Yes.
We need a new option.
Mm-hmm. I'm just speaking about what we have. It's almost like I don't like producing electricity with coal, oil, or nuclear. But currently, other than solar and wind, it's kind of like the choice. And so that's the whole thing of just dealing with what the situation is in the now. And in our current now, Donald Trump is the only one who seemed, and I just want to me, one of the reasons I believe him is because he's a businessman. One of the reasons why the Chinese are so into promoting good defense but no offense is because at their core, they're merchant. They've been merchants for thousands and thousands of years. You can't run good supply lines with war in a way. War is bad for all business except the military-industrial complex. If you're not in the business of selling weapons, war is the worst thing that can happen to business. And so I'm just thinking that as a business person, Donald Trump sees that war is stupid. And therefore, we need to open a dialogue with who the adversary. Again, Russia to me is not an adversary. That's a fake adversary. They are not adversarial. They may be adversarial at us philosophically, but that's why they're all saying why we should have diplomacy and dialogue. That's where you take your adversarial energy. You take it to a table. You don't start putting bullets in your guns. So, but as far as accountability, I'd like to go old school where we go back where our word is our bond. Where, if you cross your word, you kind of cross yourself. And so, in other words, if he gets elected, he got elected based on what he said, and we have to kind of contract with each other as citizens. We're not going to forget what you said, and we intend to hold you accountable. And I mean, to me, accountability of other people starts with accountability to self and your own one-on-one relationships with other people. And so, and that kind of accountability means where you don't make excuses when you screw up anymore. You accept you screwed up. You do the adjustments. There's no need to feel guilty or sorry. You move on. You move on without the same mistakes in your programming. And so I just really feel we need to fix ourselves so we can fix our government. And that might be the last word on that. If you might want to have a last word, then I'm going to go to the final subject.
Well, let's go to the final subject, knowing that I believe our divine blueprint is intact. And so I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with the power that every individual has to enforce that accountability.
Yeah.
So let's move on. What you got? What you got?
Well, I have something from a dear brother and friend of mine, Joseph Butch Robbins, who will be somebody I'm going to do a Mystic View, but I'm waiting until I move to Floyd so I can actually record it with he and I in the same room so we can make some music together during that interview. In case you don't know, Butch Robbins is a banjo player, a virtuoso banjo player, and he's one of the people with the projects in Global Mission to Peace, and part of it is bringing music with the message. And he said a couple of things to me recently, and one of them I want to discuss. The other one I just wanted to quickly bring up is he used a phrase referring to the let's call it the Illuminati pyramid with the all-seeing eye on top. And he just talked about some people who are focused more on that than on themselves. Is what they're doing is they're trying to climb the pyramid so they can pluck out the eye of the pyramid. And I just loved the concept of plucking out the eye of the pyramid. As I shared with Shelley pre-show, it kind of reminded me of what I think it was Odysseus or one of the Greek heroes who was trapped in a cave with a cyclops, and then he blinded. And when you think about it, the cyclops was this big, massive thing that really created a lot of problems for humanity. And it had one eye, and it was big, and it was bad, and it created trouble. And then you look at the Illuminati pyramid, and you see one eye that's big, it's bad, and it makes trouble. So you start to see a little bit of a corollary here. And so I really enjoyed when Butch had mentioned about plucking the eye out of the Great Pyramid. But he said something much more important to me, and that was what we need. One of the problems with being primarily a capitalist country is that it's always chasing the money. And the people with the most disposable income tend to be the young adults before they start families. When they're first kind of getting their job, they might even still be living at home. So they have their rent covered or they're only paying a portion. So they have a lot more expendable money or disposable income or discretionary income than much of the other portions of society. So the people, the marketers, go after that market. They will find out what do they like, what are they interested in, and culture kind of forms around this small group of emerging Americans and their interests. So we end up having a culture that's kind of flavor of the month or flavor of, of a decade. And the thing is, these are ephemeral. These things come and go. And then you have what endures. And that's what Butch had said. We need to focus more on what endures and not what comes and goes. I mean, where all the attention, all the energy, all the creativity goes at marketing to this small segment of people, where the things that endure do not get looked at. In many ways, it's like we don't look at the quality of the fabric. We look at the color of the dye of the fabric. What color are we going to dye our fabric this week, without looking at whether or not the fabric itself is fraying? Does the fabric need repair? And so his whole thing was that we need to be more focused on what endures. And of course, he's a person in my age group, a few years older, and we have endured. As he said, the graveyards are filled with young fools. It's the people who have managed to get into their sixth decade that have endured. And some of them have a lot of wisdom to offer and a lot of insight. And that if only we would make use of what they think about the world instead of what the group that wants to spend some money thinks about the world. And I just want to share that because what endures, focusing on what endures. I love that as a concept.
So do I. I'm going to share that. however, before we address that, I would like to bring us back to what you mentioned about the Cyclops. What if that single eye at the top of the pyramid that needs to be plucked out, what if that Cyclops was actually representing our pineal gland? What if that Cyclops was actually talking about our third eye, our pineal gland, our more refined, very needed insights and more refined vision that we are really trying to bring back online, not further subdue with things like the fluorides and the programming from television and so on. I could go on. We don't need to. What if it's not in our best interest to pluck out that eye from the pyramid? What if it's a tool that we all need, not in the hands of someone that's going to try to use it against us? What if it's time for us to take action and learn how to use that eye for ourselves? What if?
I love that, and that took me away for a minute, because because if anybody's heard some of my earlier tapes, I talk about us becoming our own elite, and it's not an abusive elite. It's just, again, that elite performance. So in many ways, to me, to pluck out that eye is actually to pluck out our own eye, because that very strong edifice with the big view on top should be, in fact, the view we have, and then instead of and anything underneath us is something that we bathe in our love. We don't exploit it. We understand it and we appreciate. We stand on the shoulders of others, but this is how we get to our height. And I have to admit, when you said that, maybe we don't want to pluck it out, and the allusion to the one eye being the third eye, I loved that. I really did, Shelley.
Thanks. Me too.
And so that those are the three tops I wanted to cover. So part of what we're going to be doing in Mystic View, and one of the reasons I partnered with Shelley, is Shelley has a little segment that we're now going to go into called The Good News. So would you want to share, and this is good news from around the world. And Shelley, I'm now turning over most of the portion of this last thing. I mean, I'm here for dialogue, but this is now you lead and I opine.
I am so grateful and so appreciative that I have the task of focusing on good news. That's so beautiful, and there's so much to choose from. So I'm going to narrow it down just for today to two topics. One being scalar energy, scalar in the sense of how we're used, because we started off the show with talking about the immune system. I'd like to focus on how scalar technology is used for people's health to bring about wellness on every level. And then the second is similar, because scalar is on a quantum level. We're talking on a quantum level, the broadcast that kind of sends out a frequency of nutrients or enzymes or whatever it is. I can explain a little bit of what that is, or anybody can just Google scalar energy, and I'll give a little shout out to somebody named Tom Palladino. I do not know this person, but I do know that this individual has offered free scalar individual sessions for 15 days. I think that's pretty substantial, and that's a gift to all your viewers, to the whole audience. You just go check him out. But secondly to that is the group meditations that are going on globally now. It used to be 20 years ago, man, if we had a global meditation, it was one little pocket of people. And today, this month alone, if you just look at the global meditations, the founder of Quantum University, Dr. Paul Drouin, he has been traveling the world to all the sacred sites. He will be in New York on the 22nd. You can join him to participate in a global meditation there. But because it's the same sort of it's the same sort of energy. See, we went from this very substantial particle in healing or in medicine where we would have to take something, take an herb or a plant to make us adjust the frequency in our body. And from there, we learned about homeopathy. That's somewhat finer and somewhat more subtle. And you can see the progress that we're actually making. Now we're onto scalar energy, and that is so much more refined. You know, where I see this going ultimately is to where we are able to just, with our own direction, thought, feeling, create the frequency of whatever balances healing would take place. For example, so you have a cold or a flu, all you have to do is know what the opposite frequency to that is, and it completely balances it. This is basically the essence of where I see us going, and I think we are very close with the technology that is being permitted and that we are now accessing, such as scalar technology. I think we're really close to not even needing that. It's a little bridge to get to where we naturally have the ability to create wellness all around us, where we no longer look outside ourselves to find our security, where we no longer think our love is, or our source is something that exists out there. We are starting to really own it. That's why I love the scalar technology, and that's why I chose that for our topic of good news. What think the Reverend Radagast about the scalar technology?
Beg your pardon? I don't think I heard your question.
I'm just asking you, what's your feelings about where we're going with the scalar, the 0 point energy, right?
Okay.
You know, it's an electromagnetic frequency, but it's different than the harmful electromagnetic frequencies. It's not the same thing at all. It's a longitudinal, whereas the other is more of a transverse wave.
Well, for people who don't understand what, I mean, longitudinal obviously means it kind of propagates this way, which in two dimensions, that looks like it comes out sideways. Obviously, in 3 dimensions, it comes out peripherally at all levels. You know, it's kind of just from the center outward.
It's more like a circle.
Yeah, because it would be from a point
Right.
within what we might consider a sphere, and that sphere would be demarcated by the various scalar waves coming from a central point, and they propagate just like a circle would. Very often when we conceive things, what we're doing is we're often doing it in 2 dimensions, and that's another thing we need to break out more often, is when we have a 2-dimensional thing to try and take it to 3 dimensions, because that's really what the real picture is. And so how exactly, you might want to explain to people, what is it about scalar technology that impacts our biology in a positive, that can impact our biology in a positive way? What are the effects? Where, you know, kind of like, what are the stimuli from these waves that create effects in our body?
Okay, so you nearly named it. You were right on the cusp of naming it. So if you think of scalar waves as an electromagnetic wave, just as you described, it exists within the vacuum, if you got to picture this, within the vacuum of the empty space between the atoms. So we're all told, okay, we're 99.999% empty space. That's where it takes effect. But that's everything. That's 99.999%. That's everything.
Right.
And so just to describe briefly how it actually works is that on a quantum level, which we're talking, like you said, you have to get to the 3rd dimension, but this is actually taking it to a compressed 4th dimension. So what we're talking about is almost a compression of time, whereby it seems so simple, right? They use your photograph, you have to send them a pretty high quality picture, but then what they do is they overlay and they project the image of whatever it is you need. So for instance, nutrients or enzymes, which I think enzymes would be an awesome show on another day. The enzymes in itself, because this is magnetic that we're talking about. And the magnetic is creating the specific angle of light that we need to create not only the healing, but to activate our pineal. So what the scalar is bringing us so close to activating that for us. Did I answer your question? I know I kind of, it's like the ripple effect. I did the same thing that scalar energy does.
Well, you did. I hope you did well enough. I mean, I really wasn't asking so much for myself as I was asking for the listeners.
Yes.
Because
yeah.
to me, one of my faults with New Age terminology is that often everybody recognizes the terms, and so they accept it. Oh, yeah, skeleton. But the understanding of these terms is missing from a lot of people. And so I just feel that to understand the terms is to decide you like something from an informed place rather than just everybody's talking about scalar. I'm on board. Oh, yeah, it's what's hot. Scalar is hot, baby. Let's do scalar. What is it?
Yeah.
It's hot. Scalar's hot. That's...
You named it. You got to feel it. You just feel it. Never mind thinking about it, right? What we're doing is we're opening our heart to connect it with our mind. That's the first step. But if somebody goes, yeah, that's just, more New Age talk, New Age speak, how do you do that? Well, just draw right back to feeling. And if you get confused about that, because you're getting confused because your brain's trying to process it and then you're not feeling. You need to just feel. So even if it means, okay, just feel the chair you're sitting on, right? Or just hold your own hand and feel that. That's going to snap you into that place. And that's where you can begin to activate your own happiness. I would like to take you into bliss. I think bliss is really important. And if I can give a little shout out to Dan Winters, you could learn a lot just by listening to a few of the videos, because when I'm talking about bliss, I'm not just talking about being happy. I'm talking about the very seriousness of bliss in a cell.
Yeah. And also to clarify one other thing, when you were saying time is compressed in a fourth dimension, that would be a third dimensional way of expressing time in the fourth dimension. What to me, and I know you'll agree, but just for people who might go, time is compressed in the fourth dimension. In the fourth dimension, there is no time. Plain and simple. There's only now. So when you only have now, the kind of view from our timeline view is it looks like time is compressed into one little tiny thing called now. Except that that's only time that there really is. Basically it's our memory that takes old now moments and calls them the past, and takes possible now moments and calls them the future. But there is only the now moment. The only place you can act is in now. So I think when Shelley says that time is compressed in the fourth dimension, that's another way of saying the eternal now. But it's really, again, we experience it as if like time just compresses and becomes like one little spot. And that's what it is. We kind of travel through space in the third dimension to get from point A to point B. We have to kind of transition through space. In the fourth dimension, you transition through time. If you want to be somewhere, you think about that at a certain time and you will be there. So it's kind of like the fact that there is no, you basically use time the way we use space in the fourth dimension. Because time is open. It's an open field. So you can actually travel from backwards or forwards in time, just like you could walk back and forth in your backyard. Would you consider that a good analogy?
That was very, very tidy in a nutshell. That's very clear expression, as we have come to know and expect from you. Thank you. So
back to you. I want to go back. I want you to give your two good news stories as news stories. Please.
Oh, all right.
Please.
Okay. Number one news story. Project Noosphere is a global meditation, and you're all invited. This global meditation gives everybody the opportunity to participate in creating the world, in remembering the world. That's harmony. It exists. It has always existed all around us, but we need to remember that. And by remembering that, we'll bring it into being in your own life, and then you'll see it reflected in the world around you. That's number one, as a news story. Number two, as a news story, scalar energy is available to you right now today. You can access this by just looking it up online. You can avail many of the free kind of sample services that are out there. And I highly recommend that you at least give it a try, and you will feel in your own body and register in your own cells how useful or how productive that is. And what you're co-creating is also bringing the memory home of who you really are. And I don't want to sound all new agey, but that's the absolute truth of it. So if we wanted to speak in medical terms, I'm talking your hippocampus that has the great plasticity to change, literally. So the news story is, go ahead and sign up with somebody like Tom Palladino. Access this as a gift from us to you. But you need to take action on it. It's up to you.
Thank you, Shelley. I'm not sure what our timing is because I didn't mark the timing, but I have a feeling we have about used our time properly. And so I'd like to thank Shelley. I'd like to let everybody know that I intend to have Shelley as basically doing Mystic View with Shelley. It's kind of like a new format I'm trying with. Please give me your feedback. If you make a comment, let me know how you are enjoying me working with somebody as eloquent and plugged in as Shelley is. And so that will now conclude Mystic View number 9 on February 21st, 2016. I'd like to thank you very much, Shelley, for joining me, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
On behalf of myself and everybody at Global Mission of Peace, God bless. Love for all, hatred for none. See you till next time.